This morning, I'm going to share the program with Randy Dowdy. You're in for a treat with Randy. I'm going to do a hard stop at about 11:30, so about 19-20 minutes. So I'm going to give you a crash course in some of the work we're doing relative to soybeans on Randy's farm in particular. Randy will tell you more about where he's from and how he farms when he comes up here. You'll also have a breakout session with Randy at 4:50 this afternoon as a roundtable discussion for question and answer follow-up. So I strongly encourage you to take advantage of that as well. I'll tell you from my experience working with Randy that if you're really interested in meeting crop nutrient demand and doing that in a timely fashion and understanding when crops need nutrients, and in what forms and methods you can get that applied to the field, Randy's is as good as you'll find. So good cooperator for me. I think you're in for a treat when he follows me up this morning. So with that, we're going to get started. I titled my talk this morning, I did everything right, so why did I not cut 100 bushels of soybeans? And this is, I really titled this, I developed this title based on some of the things we've learned at Randy's and some of the things we're trying to achieve on his farm. Very different setting than you farm in here in the southeast, and we'll talk about that as well. One quick promotional here. If you really want solid agronomic information, I encourage all of you to download this Pioneer Growing Point app. Tremendous tool. If you want resources behind the scenes, nice app. Pull up your agronomy topic of choice and you'll get nice publications on that. So encourage you to look at that if you hadn't already done so. So one thing I get to do in my current role is I get to interact with farmers from all around the country. I cover all the way to New Mexico now, parts of Texas, parts of Oklahoma, and all of the southeast. And I always survey big grower groups and I ask them specific questions. And this is one of the questions I ask them. And I chose this particular question because I only had 20 minutes and I needed to get a point across. And it'll lead well into what Randy's going to cover here in a minute. Is there a specific yield level that you have difficulty surpassing? So if I ask the folks in Western Kentucky, what would they tell me that is? Most of them are going to tell you 60 bushels. Okay? Fair number of dryland farmers here. If I move to a different group of growers in northeast Arkansas, what are they going to tell you? Say again? 60 bushels. Okay? Okay, if I move to West Tennessee, what are they going to tell you? 60 bushels. Okay, so they're telling me, hey, we're kind of having a hard time consistently breaking 60 bushels of beans. And then I turn around and I ask them this next question. And this ties in well to what Virgil was saying earlier. Okay? Knowing what you've got, knowing your fertility levels, send a soil sample off, what yield level do you put on it? So what's Western Kentucky going to tell you? 50 bushels. What's northeast Arkansas going to tell you? 50 bushels. And what's West Tennessee going to tell you? 50 bushels. Bottom line, regardless of any group I go, anywhere I go, it's the same story. You're getting 5 to 10 more bushels of beans than you're fertilizing for. It is that simple. And they'll tell you water is limiting, blah, 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 and it may be, but I promise you, baseline fertility is the single biggest limiting factor of soybean production. You've got to understand the nutrient needs. If you don't learn anything else, learn that today. And this is the point when I usually talk to big grower groups. Randy, we were at a meeting not long ago. I said, well, I can go home now. You've solved your problem. And it's you know, that sounds a little harsh, but it's true, okay? So I also tie that in with particular nutrients. Y'all brought up sulfur. I asked them, well, how many pounds does West Kentucky put out for sulfur? None. Okay? How many does northeast Arkansas put out? About half, putting up to 10 pounds. Wayne, 80 bushel beans. How much sulfur?
How much do you need?
Yeah, how much do you need? How much does the crop take up to make that crop?
About 30.
About 30 pounds, okay? At least West Tennessee, or northeast Arkansas is putting out 10, okay? Western Tennessee. Those guys putting a little sulfur out, so they're on the ball. Bottom line is none of these folks are putting out enough to meet the demand for a 75, 80 bushel crop. There's a reason they're not passing 60, 70 bushel beans. They're not fertilizing for it. Okay? And these guys won't answer this. If you use turning point clickers, they won't answer this in a regular setting. They won't raise their hand. You give them those little clickers and ask, they'll tell you the truth. Okay? All right, so anyway, case in point. Now, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but focus on the amount of nutrients that crops need to grow a certain crop. This 80 bushel beans, let's talk about K. They have to take 256 pounds of K. This is going to tie into some of the work we're doing at Randy's. Okay, so lots of nutrient demand. There's your 26 pounds of sulfur weight. Okay? You look at 100 bushel beans, you got to know not only how much they're taking up, but are the production systems we're using allowing that crop to take that nutrient up when it needs it. K for Randy and his sandy soils, it acts more like a mobile nutrient. For using the Mid-South, it's not quite as mobile. Okay, everybody agree with that? All right, right here, 5.7, 9.6, 2.4. When's that occurring? Early pod, soft seed. So I'm asking you, how we're applying K, can you apply that amount of nutrients for 100 bushel beans with all up front, with the background levels we have in the soil? I can't answer yes or no, but I can tell you this is like filling up a sink with water and pulling the plug. It's just going, I mean, that crop is sucking potassium, and it's sucking it later in the season. So I'm not sure that we can meet that big a demand utilizing standard fertility practices. Okay, so nutrient demand, when it needs to be, how much, when it needs it, and where it needs it. Randy will build well on this here in a little while. So anyway, that 100 bushel beans would be equivalent to about 308 bushel corn that you would have to fertilize for. Okay, lots of nutrients. So this is where Randy comes into the picture. Southeast is a lot different than Mid-South. Sandy soils, nematode problems, not many indeterminate beans over there. Most of them hadn't been over there because they don't have root knot resistance. Okay, so really they hadn't looked at the production systems you've looked at in the Mid-South. So we wanted to look at some of those. Let's take you through the year real quick, like in 14 when we started this. Now this is an environmental heat profile here. This is key flower in the pod set. Just know in 14 that we had a mild growing year, didn't get planted to May 5th, not extreme heat, okay? Average light during pod set. This light piece is important. Okay, we can spend an hour on this, but we don't have time today, okay? So average light in 14. Picked a field that's been in corn 3 years, Randy? 2 years? What was it before that?
Pine trees.
Pine trees. So we said, heck, it's been in pine trees. We don't have to worry about root knot nematode in this field. We're going to choose this field. High yield field, 2 years of corn, we're going to put beans in. 3.9 to 4.8 in this field. What are those yellow spots? Came out of the pine trees, 2 years of corn, got root knot. The root knot's a real issue for them, okay? So real deal, 45 T11, pretty decent pod set. Pretty good load, isn't it? Okay? Look a little closer. What do you see on the roots? Absolutely eaten up with root knot. Nearly 100 bushel beans. Eaten up with root knot. Okay? 47 T36, 109. Okay? Determinant in the neighboring field, 108. So we started to feel like, hey, we're starting to understand this thing. We're getting some yields. Randy's basically fertilizing and watering through this infestation. Okay, so we know we're getting nutrients there. We figured, heck, that cost us probably 15, 20 bushels, I suspect, just the infestation of root knot. So we started targeting root knot, did some work this year we won't get into. We also started looking at tracking nutrients. Potassium level here, sufficiency level 1.75 up to about 3 from a tissue sample standpoint. So we wanted to know if we were sufficient based on the values that are published that we get back from lab. And we kind of had a target that we wanted to keep. Randy, we were thinking what? Going into this thing, we wanted to keep potassium where? 2%. Probably 2%. That was our goal. So I had one case where Southern States guy working with Randy and I on this one down there put 250 pounds of potassium nitrate out front. That's this line up here. So those levels were pretty high for a little while. But by the time you pulled that plug and that potassium demand was really high, it was right back down here with the ones that only got 75 pounds of potash up front. So what's that tell you? This up front's really not doing what we needed to do. Okay? We need it in season. And can we do that? Can we deliver it? Can we meet those demands? So that's kind of where this conversation started. Did some follow-up work this year. I won't get into details, but this was our focus. Our focus was to go into a normal production field, build a system that would allow the Georgia guys to be able to grow 80 bushel irrigated beans under pivots. Because their expectations for corn under those pivots are what, Randy?
250 or plus.
250 to 300 bushel corn, realistic. They can grow that. Peanuts, irrigated peanuts, high yields. For beans to be able to compete on that acre in Georgia, they're going to have to make 80 plus bushel beans. So that was our focus. We were going to fertilize up front for 75 to 80 bushel beans, supplement in season to meet the rest through the pivot. That was our goal. Okay? Nutrient levels came back. They were pretty good. Needed some fertilizer for 80 plus bushel beans. We elected not to put any fertilizer out and thought we'd meet it in season. Okay? Mistake number one. Everybody with me? All right. Let's
Can we
look.
get all this information you got on that app you told us to go there, or where do you?
You can get a little of this there, but I can share. This is kind of hot off the press, so I can share some with you. But anyway, bottom line is we were trying to meet these nutrient demands, supplement them. Remember, this is V6. We know we needed that potash when the plant got full size, started flowering, setting pods, so we were putting it out about 2 weeks earlier. So bottom line, we were trying to put potash out somewhere between V6 and R4 to meet that big demand. So whatever's in the soil plus what we were supplementing. That was our goal. Okay? So let's look at the environmental profile for that location. Got planted April 25th. Pretty timely. Okay? Look what happened. 95 plus degrees. When did it happen? Look there. This heat spell was 3 weeks early. Everybody remember June 15th this year? It scorched on the East Coast. Okay, that's usually July 20th heat. So we ended up setting pods right in a tremendously hot area. Now people will debate as to whether that kind of heat can cause pod abortion or or pollen sterility, flowering sterility. That's debatable. But this kind of heat, not good. Okay? So wrong time. The other thing is if you planted a week earlier, a week later, you'd escaped a lot of that heat. It was that tight. Okay? So, light. Let's go back to light. You look at that same scenario during flowering. We had kind of pukey light too. So we didn't have a lot of light to drive photosynthesis, and that was going to definitely, we know low light will lead to pod abortion. Or less than good pod set. So, lower than average light, high heat. So we got these things about ready to harvest, got 14 inches of rain between the time the leaves fell off and the time we got the combine in the field. So we got some pod deterioration too. Now something just happens, especially with early beans. Heck, it happened with full season beans on the East Coast this year. Those are things you can't control. So this is the part, let's tie some things together now. Remember, our goal was to start putting out potash at V6. Okay, and keep those numbers up. Well, we didn't get around to it, did we, Randy? We didn't get around to it. So levels dropped, R2, R3, what happened? Only time during the year, during the middle of that hot heat, that we were also low on K. Does everybody see that? High heat, low light, low K. Those are like a triple whammy, okay? So anyway, that all tied together. Why'd this line go back up? Randy applied 100 units of K in season through the pivot. 250 pound turns, Randy?
Yes.
Okay.
Source, okay.
Randy, tell them the source.
Potassium chloride is a water soluble, so O62, and it's melted, and the analysis comes to O16 as a liquid.
And you can pump it through the pivot. But bottom line, what this is telling us, hey, we got low. We can put a fair amount out, and we can turn that around pretty quickly. Now, whether this translated into yield increases, we don't know. But that tells us, hey, we can manipulate and we can influence those K levels in season if we have a method of applying them and a source that we can use to get it there. Okay? So, we're learning from this. So, we corrected some of that, or at least changed the levels. We also compared that to his home site. 5 minutes, right? His home site, which was a high yield site. This entire field, 71 acres, Randy?
Yes.
104 bushels across the scale, 70 some acres. Okay, this is what we're calling a high yield site. We know that the nutrient levels at this site were something we could compare against. There's your R2, R3. Those levels, when we're at 1.7 at the other location, we're over 2% at his home site. This was the target we were trying to achieve. Okay, everybody with me? All right. We also looked at some other things. Sulfur. Lowndes County, I think we applied 40, 50 pounds of sulfur, and we were still borderline. So we hadn't figured this sulfur piece out. Actually, at the HighYield Site, we had a couple of times where at one of the sampling locations, we were below sufficiency. So this sulfur piece, being able to feed this piece, get it in the plant, I don't have all those pieces yet, but we cut really good beans even with these levels. So I don't know how the sulfur is tied to the yield.
Dan, what leaf samples are you using?
These are standard leaf samples, going to be the probably uppermost fully expanded leaf, according to whatever the lab is going to tell you, but usually it's that. And you got to realize that these samples, as a plant gets full size, and this is a whole conversation in itself, as that plant gets full size, the maturity of that leaf is going to change. It's going to become an older leaf, and that affects what you're seeing on some of this too. I also stopped the boxes here because the labs are only going to tell you what? That's about as late as you really got a reading. It's going to say pre-R3 or something like that. Okay? We really don't understand what these levels should be out here from a lab, from a test standpoint, from a tissue sample standpoint. So anyway, boron, this is the HighYield Site. We got low in boron. We still hadn't figured this piece out. Anyway, our whole goal is this. We want to look at, this was 70, 80 bushel site. This was a 100 bushel site. And we want to know what those values are instead of ceiling. So as Randy will tell you in corn, we want to check that box. We're at 2% K at a certain growth stage. You know, and that's the whole concept. He'll tell you the same concept for corn. Okay? So Virgil talked about knowing where your levels are, right? Soil testing, knowing where you start. If you got high levels, you're good. Okay? That's all well and good. But it's not in this plant. It doesn't matter what your levels are. It doesn't matter. Okay? I looked at the field this year, nitrogen below where I wanted the levels to be. 160 pounds of nitrogen sitting right in the middle of the row. Why wasn't it in the plant? There were weak lake water. It wasn't in the solution plant, couldn't take it up. Yeah, it was in the soil profile, but it wasn't in the plant. How much you need, when you need it, where you need it. Randy will preach, he will preach to this in just a little while. So anyway, that's our goal. That site cut 75 to 80 bushels on the best beans. If you look at the test weights here, the 50, 51 pound, that's your deterioration on the seed quality. So we were at right around 80 bushel beans on a bad growing year, not doing a whole lot extra at that Lowndes County site. So we're getting close to what we need. Mother Nature's got to help us a little bit, and we got to do a few more things right that we planned. We built a plan, and we didn't stick to the plan. Okay? So we're going to do that again this year, different location. There's some seed quality issues. Let's sum this up real quick. That's my timer going off. This is Randy's home site. Okay, there's 47 T89s. I think this was a 2.5 acre cut, something like that, 2 1/4 acre cut. Got rained out, came back next day, moved the pivot, cut the adjacent section, added them together, ended up with about a 3.6 acre cut at 125. Okay, there was a 10 to 15 acre block in that field that yield monitor probably never went under 120. Went up as high as 160.
Is this sandy soil?
It's sandy loam and clay base. CEC supports that.
And the reason, and I'm on Randy, come on up and let's go ahead and transition.